Hello, Professor Rad here, and in this video we're going to continue our conversation of addition, but present it using a different technique. So in the previous videos, we've been looking at addition by breaking up numbers based off of place values, combining the like place values, and then bringing them all together in the end. So the process that we're going to look at in this video, I'm going to call the traditional process. It will involve carrying of digits occasionally. Sometimes we might not need to carry, sometimes we will. Just like with the addition process we looked at in the past, sometimes we needed a chain reaction and sometimes we didn't. So let's go ahead and work through these using the traditional process one at a time and see if we like the flavor of this method. So for part A, I've got 24 plus 51. Now, when I'm using the traditional process, the way that I'm going to set this up, instead of writing everything on one line horizontally, I'm going to line my numbers up vertically. And it's very, very important for addition that when I line them up vertically, I'm lining up the same place values. So I'll start out with 24, and then I'm going to write 51 just underneath it. So the 1 of 51 is in the ones place, and the 4 of 24 is in the ones place. So I have to make sure that this 1 gets lined up underneath that 4. So I'm going to put the 1 under the 4, and then the 5. So that's my setup for the traditional process. It's a vertical method. And then working from right to left, I'm going to add down each column. So 4 plus 1 is 5. And 2 plus 5, so I have 5, 6, 7. So 24 plus 51 is the same thing as 75. The reason this works, if I were to look at what is happening behind the scenes here, with our addition process, 24 we would have written as 20 plus 4, and 51 we would have written as 50 plus 1. So 4 and 1 would have given us 5. And 20 plus 50 would have given us 70. And then we'd have 70 plus 5 give us 75. So once you're comfortable enough with both techniques, it actually takes about the same amount of time. Even though this one looks like you're writing a lot more and like it might take more time, it actually takes the same amount of time as the traditional process once you're comfortable with it. So let's go ahead and look at part B. So in part B, we have several numbers that we're going to be adding up together. So I'm going to write this first one first. We have 8,121. Now on here, the 1 all the way to the right is in the ones place. So I'm going to pay attention to that. Then we have 243, and the 3 is in the ones place. So this 3 has to line up underneath this 1. And then I fill in the rest of the number accordingly. And then I have 1,034. So the 4 of 1,034 lines up in the ones place because it's in the ones place. And then I fill in accordingly. Now, one thing to be careful here when you're writing your numbers vertically, make sure that you're lining up columns correctly and not like scrunching some numbers together. So I'll give you an example of this problem written down correctly and incorrectly at the same time. So sometimes I'll see stuff like this. So here's what I mean by correctly and incorrectly at the same time. So the ones places are all lined up, and then the tens places are all lined up. But then look at what's happened. So my ones place has lined up. My tens place has lined up. My hundreds place starts to get a little bit squished. And then so for my thousands, I can't tell which of these digits is in the hundreds place. And so I might add them incorrectly. And so I might get the wrong answer. So be careful, make sure when you're writing things, all of your columns are written up perfectly. If you want to use graph paper to help you do this, to keep your columns nice and even, I recommend that you do so. But making sure your place values are lined up is really, really important for this method. Once we, draw all over our hand. Once we have everything lined up, let's go ahead and write them all out or add them up. So I'm going to do 1 plus 3. So 3 and 1 makes 4. plus 4 more, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 and 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, and 0 doesn't change it. And then 8 plus 1 makes 9. So we end up getting 9,398. One of the other things that example B is illustrating, in addition to making sure we line everything up on the right, notice this 243 is not lined up on the left, it's lined up on the right, because of our place values. The other thing is that this process works whether you have 2 numbers or 3 numbers or, 70 numbers. I'm not going to give you 70 numbers to add up, but if you had them, you could certainly line them all up this way. Just be careful with your place values. So let's try an example where with the addition process, we'd end up with a chain reaction. So that's going to be example C. So here we have 56 plus 28. So 56, 28, I'm making sure to line up my place values correctly. And now let's go through and add them. So I'm going to add together 6 plus 8. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So when I add 8 and 6 together, I get 14. I'm going to take, so this is what's in my head right now. I've got a 14. I'm going to take the 4 ones of 14 and write them underneath because this 4 is in the ones place in 14. So it needs to line up in the ones place in this column. Then the 1 of the 14, it's in the tens place. So I've got to add it over into the tens column. So for 14, I have the 4 here and I carry the 1 over. Now I can go ahead and add everything in the ones place. So we have 5 plus 1 makes 6, 7, 8. So we end up getting 84. So there you go. When I'm using this process, and there would have been a chain reaction with the addition process, I end up carrying something over. This is kind of like, remember when we drew the shapes? If we had 10 of the same shape, we crossed them all out and they became one of the next shape up. That's what's going on here. So with this 14, this 1 is representing 10 shapes that we could have condensed into the next shape up. And so it's getting carried into this next column. 10 dots became 1 circle. All right, so we've done a couple examples with whole numbers. Let's work with some decimals because that made things trickier before. So for our first example with decimals, I have 28 and 65/100. And then 39 and 75/100. Now, again, I want to make sure I'm lining up my place values. That's very important. So the 8 and the 9 are both in the ones place. So I'm going to make sure that this 9 gets lined up underneath the 8, lining up my decimal points. And everything falls into place after that. So there was a 3 to the left, and a 7 and a 5 to the right. All right, so now that I've got everything lined up, we can go ahead and add these numbers. We're going to work the same way as we did before, and basically we're just going to end up bringing the decimal point down in the end. So 5 plus 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we already have a carrying situation. So with 10, I'm going to put the 0 underneath, and this 1 gets carried over into the next column. Now I'll add 6 plus 1 to get 7, and then 7 plus 7 is 14. So this 4 of 14 is going to go under here, and the 1 gets carried over into the next column. Then I have 1 plus 8, which is 9, and 9 plus 9 is 18. So I've got 18. So the 8 is going to go underneath, and the 1 gets carried over. 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 plus 3, sorry, I had a little, my brain disappeared for a moment. 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 plus 3 makes 6. And I'll bring the decimal point down. So we end up getting 68.40. And in this one, because this 0 is an unnecessary 0 in the end, we could write our answer as 68.4. That would be like cleaning up our answer a little bit. Now, one thing I want to point out, usually with the traditional process, we don't write this stuff down. Okay? So usually with the traditional addition process, this would be what you see written down on a paper. I like to write this down because it helps you guys know what's going on in my head, because once you become comfortable with this, you won't need to write it down. But I'm always a proponent for, if it helps you to write it, write it. I'm the sort of person who has difficulty visualizing in my head. So the more I write down, the better. It just helps me to understand. So until you become comfortable enough with it that you can visualize it in your head, feel free to write stuff down as long as it helps. All right, let's do, drop a marker and do one more problem. Let's do part E, which has 3 decimals in it. So let's clear out a bit of space for this one. It's a true celebration. It's part E. So we have 16.3. That's going to be the first number I write down. And then I have 2 and 5800ths. And this is where the place value gets dangerous, because the 2 is in the ones place. So I have to make sure the 2 lines up with the 6, or the decimal points get lined up. And then I have 5800ths. So the 5 goes under the 3, and the 8 is off on its own, kind of off to the right. So when you have decimals, one of the things we're noticing, they don't automatically get aligned to the right. That's only the case with whole numbers, because when you have a whole number, the ones place is always on the right. But when you have a decimal, you can have longer decimal places or longer whole number places. So you really have to be careful with that place value. And then lastly, we have 70.11. So that 0 of 70 is in the ones place. So it's going to get lined up in the ones place. And then the 7 is to the left, making sure I'm lining it up with the 1. So my columns are straight. And then a 1 and a 1. Whew, all right, so that is my first process for this one, for setting it up. Then for some folks, the fact that there's a gap here is troubling. So if that troubles you, you could toss in an unnecessary 0 as a placeholder. You could also throw one in front of the 2 as well, if you want everything to have a digit in the column. You don't have to do this, but if it bothers you or confuses you not to have something there, you can throw a 0 in. Once everything is lined up properly, now we go ahead and add like we've been doing. So 0 plus 8 is 8, plus 1 makes 9. So I don't have to do any carrying for that one. 3 plus 5 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So no carrying there either. Great. Here's where my decimal point lives. 6 plus 2 plus 0 is 8. And 1 plus 7 is 8. So we end up getting 88.99. So for me personally, when I think about the different methods and when I like to use them, let me get out of the way of the example here. This vertical method is helpful for me when I have decimals that are to the same place value. The picture method, I think, works best for me when I have a problem like this one, where the decimals were a little bit different lengths. So here we had 5800ths, whereas here we only had 3/10. So we had different length of decimals. For that one, I like the picture method. And for whole numbers, I actually like the process, writing it all out. I just find that faster and easier for me to use. So I like all of these methods for different reasons in different situations. What you want to do, now that we've gone through the addition process and writing it with pictures and using the traditional method here, what you want to think about is which one works best for you. And try not to say, well, I like traditional because I know that one. Maybe you think you know it because you learned it at one point and it was comfortable. Wait until, try the other methods until you can kind of get to that same sort of comfort. And then truly you can ask, which one of these works better for me? And if it's still the traditional method, great, use it. But if it's not, now you found a method that you like better and just fits your brain a little bit better. So this is going to wrap up addition for whole numbers and decimals. In the next batch of videos, we'll be looking at subtraction, and we're going to do a similar thing. So we will go through several different techniques for subtraction. Again, I'm going to like those techniques for different reasons. For me personally, as a human being, but maybe you find one that connects better to you, or a couple that connect better to you in different situations. So take a moment and kind of reflect and think about which method you like best and why. And then when you're ready, we can head into subtraction. So I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.